Throughout her reign as the final Tudor Queen of England, Elizabeth I had a huge number of threats that she faced to her queenship and throne. She dealt with these relatively effectively, for example, seeing off the Spanish Armada. However, one of the most ruthless ways that she vanquished a claimant to her throne was through the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. Mary was, after all, Elizabeth's cousin, and she was the Queen of Scotland, who reigned for a total of around 25 years, despite the fact she was in France for a long period of this. Mary, Queen of Scots, was the Catholic foil for the Protestant Elizabeth, who many people believed should have been on the throne of England over Elizabeth, a young woman whose mother, Anne Boleyn, had been executed, and Elizabeth was written out of the line of succession. The reason she had to deal with Mary once and for all was because Mary had implicated herself in a number of plots. All of these had the desired outcome to assassinate Elizabeth I and to place Mary as the Queen of England. It was a dangerous time for the English Queen, but what exactly happened inside the walls of Fotheringhay Castle on the 8th of February 1587? As the former Queen of Scotland was greeted on the scaffold in the Great Hall by an axeman. And how did it get to this? To support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. Mary, Queen of Scots, was hopeless when it came to the men that she chose to keep the company of, especially those who became her husbands. Her first husband, the Dauphin of France, died at a young age. Her second husband, Lord Darnley, was a power-hungry and violent alcoholic who wanted the throne for himself, and her third husband most probably blew up her second and had him murdered. These marriages ruined her reputation. Mary had a son, the later King James I of England and the successor to Elizabeth I, but Mary, Queen of Scots, was abducted by Lord Bothwell, her third husband, and things escalated as the announcement of their marriage became incredibly unpopular. Catholics across Scotland believed the marriage was unlawful, and they did not recognise Bothwell as her rightful husband, and many believed that Mary was disgraceful for marrying the man who many believed had murdered her second husband. The Scottish peers and lords turned upon her, and they raised their army, which resulted in a confrontation at Carberry Hill. There was no battle, but Mary's forces deserted, and Mary found herself locked up on the inside of Lochleven Castle. But on the 2nd of May 1568, she managed to escape from the castle, and she then raised an army, but was defeated at the Battle of Langside by the Regent Moray's forces. Mary then fled south and crossed into England. She landed at Workington in today Cumbria. Before staying in different halls, she was taken into protective custody upon the orders of Elizabeth I at Carlisle Castle, and Mary thought that Elizabeth I, the English Queen, would help her regain her throne as the Scottish Queen. Mary had been deposed in favour of her son James, but she then was moved around many different houses. Mary, Queen of Scots, was held under house arrest, and she was imprisoned under the orders of the English Queen, but her imprisonment was something that was not too hard to begin with. She would be housed with wealthy people inside of castles and large stately homes, and she was allowed a household staff, servants, and to do, at times, practically whatever she wanted. But as time went on, Elizabeth I considered Mary to become an increasingly more dangerous threat to her throne, and she was then housed in tougher conditions. These were still rather good, though. Mary then began to become embroiled in a number of Catholic plots to oust Elizabeth I from the throne in favour of her. The first plot, the Ridolfi plot, planned to replace Elizabeth with Mary, and the help of invading Spanish fleet and the Duke of Norfolk Thomas Howard, who would later be executed for this. The plot would have seen Mary and Howard marrying, but Elizabeth's spymaster came across this. The Catholics in England were frustrated at their treatment by Elizabeth's government, and many Catholic priests were being hunted down and some were in fact executed, but they began to search for ways to replace Elizabeth I with Mary Queen of Scots. Another plot, the Throckmorton plot of 1583, arose, and this aimed to free Mary from house arrest, make her queen, and restore Roman Catholicism across England. This too would be backed by a Spanish invasion force led by the French Duke of Guise and a revolt inside of England. This too failed and was discovered, and at this time people were now becoming incredibly suspicious of Mary herself. Following this plot, the Bond of Association and the Act for the Queen's Safety was passed, which allowed the government to execute and kill anyone who plotted to murder or assassinate Queen Elizabeth. Mary was causing too many problems, but the nail in her coffin that secured her fate was the Babington plot. The plot was named after Anthony Babington, a Catholic conspirator, and in this there were letters sent between plotters and Mary with the intentions to kill Elizabeth, and these letters were infiltrated and picked up by Francis Walsingham, Elizabeth's chief spymaster. The plot had many different steps, including freeing Mary from her imprisonment and the need to kill Elizabeth. Mary Queen of Scots foolishly replied to the letter consenting to the plan and plot, and Mary's letter, which was sent in code, was decoded, and this gave Sir Francis Walsingham the evidence to go to Elizabeth I with concerns that Mary was plotting against her. Specifically, the implicating letter said, "The affair being thus prepared and forces in readiness both within and without the realm, then shall it be time to set the 6 gentlemen to work, taking order upon the accomplishment of their design. I may be suddenly transported out of this place." These words, specifically, were Mary Queen of Scots giving her blessing to the plot which would have resulted in the murder of Elizabeth I. Under the 1585 Act of Association, Walsingham now had all the evidence he needed to deal with Mary once and for all, and to get rid of the enemy of the English Queen. One of the plotters was immediately arrested and was tortured, and on the 9th of August 1586, the possessions of Mary were searched for, and the cipher and a number of letters were found. Anthony Babington, the ringleader, was arrested and was taken to the Tower, and he later confessed to his part of the plot, and in this implicated Mary and the other conspirators. Babington had issued 7 detailed statements against Mary and others, and Elizabeth I's Privy Council now demanded that Elizabeth should summon Parliament to discuss dealing with Mary Queen of Scots once and for all. Elizabeth, though, was hesitant, and she believed that Mary was a divinely appointed queen and sovereign, and that as her cousin she had Tudor blood, and that she would be killing a Tudor woman sent by God to rule over Scotland and a kingdom. But Elizabeth's situation was too dangerous. It had gone too far. Mary had overtly committed treason against Elizabeth and had conspired to murder the English Queen and to take the throne for herself. And subsequently, if this had happened, Mary would have restored the Catholic worship and undone all of the work that Elizabeth's father, Henry VIII, and brother, Edward VI, had done. On the 9th of September 1586, Elizabeth I summoned Parliament, and 11 days later Babington and the other conspirators were hanged, drawn and quartered upon Tower Hill, and it was said that their privates were cut off and bowels taken out alive and seeing before they were then beheaded and cut into 4 pieces, to be then publicly displayed. The plotters were now dead, but what about Mary? Mary Queen of Scots was moved to Fotheringhay Castle, and she arrived on the 25th of September 1586. She was then placed on trial before a court of 36 noblemen, including the Queen's loyal chief adviser Cecil and Walsingham the spymaster. It was a foregone conclusion, however, what would happen. Mary tried to declare her innocence and refused to acknowledge the court, and even claimed that "I am no subject, and I would rather die 1,000 deaths than acknowledge myself to be one," meaning that she was never English and a subject of Elizabeth I. She could never be accused of treason, and this required a subject of the English Queen to be plotting against her. Elizabeth later wrote to Mary saying, "You have in various ways and manners attempted to take my life and bring my kingdom to destruction by bloodshed. It is my will that you answer the nobles and peers of the kingdom as if I myself were present." Mary was warned that she would be tried in absence, but she agreed to stand before the court, and on the 14th of October, her trial began. She conducted her own defence after being denied legal counsel, and she appeared as the big-made woman, and her face was described as full and fat, double-chinned and hazel eyes. She denied knowledge of the Babington plot and claimed that the letter was a forgery and that she had never corresponded with Babington. She then said she would never make shipwreck of my soul by compressing the death of my dearest sister, a woman who had saved her from the Scots, Elizabeth I. There was too much evidence against her, and because of this the commission pronounced her guilt despite a short adjournment in the proceedings. The trial took place in the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle, and it was here where Mary Queen of Scots would lose her head. Following her conviction, Elizabeth I hesitated greatly to order Mary's execution, despite the pressure being exerted by the Privy Council and by the English Parliament. She was worried that killing an anointed queen sent by God to rule would later prevent her from getting into heaven, and she was also concerned about a Catholic alliance invading England because of this. But on the 1st of February 1587, Elizabeth I finally signed the death warrant. On the evening of the 7th of February 1587, Mary Queen of Scots was told that she needed to get her affairs in order as she would be executed the following morning. She spent her last few hours in prayer and writing her will and a letter to the King of France. She distributed her possessions amongst her loyal ladies, and all whilst this happened, a low scaffolding was created in the Great Hall of Fotheringhay Castle. It is probable that Mary may have heard the carpenters working on this, and that the scaffold was covered in black cloth. On the 8th of February 1587, after very little sleep, Mary was summoned to the Great Hall. She was led into it by a number of guards who were there to prevent her escape. On the scaffold were the stools, one for her to rest upon, and one for the Earl of Shrewsbury, and the final one for the Earl of Kent, who were sent to officially witness the execution on behalf of Elizabeth I. Mary was allowed 4 people to attend upon her, and these were her steward, Andrew Melville, her physician, Dominique Bourgoin, her surgeon, Jacques Gervais, and her apothecary. These accompanied her and did her 2 ladies, Jane Kennedy and Elizabeth Curl. The Great Hall was filled with spectators, and Mary was helped up onto the scaffold where the executioner and his assistant were stood. Her executioner, a man named Bull, fell to his knees immediately and asked Mary for her forgiveness in what he was about to do. And he requested that Queen Mary of Scotland, pardoned him. Mary replied to the executioner, "I forgive you with all my heart for now. I hope you shall make an end to my troubles." It was then time for the execution, and her ladies Jane Kennedy and Elizabeth Curl helped Mary to remove her outer garments, and they revealed that she was wearing a velvet petticoat and a pair of sleeves in crimson brown, the liturgical colour of martyrdom in the Catholic Church. As Mary undressed and disrobed, she claimed she had never had such grooms before, nor ever put off her clothes before such company, referring to the amount of spectators. She was then given a blindfold by Jane Kennedy, which was a white veil embroidered with gold. Mary then bid her ladies farewell and secured the blindfold, before she knelt down upon the cushion in front of the block, and she positioned her head and stretched out her arms, informing the executioner that she was ready. Mary Queen of Scots' final words were, "In manus tau domain, commendo spiritum meum, into thy hands, O Lord, I commend my spirit." Now her execution was not clean. Mary was not beheaded by a single strike of the axe. The first blow crashed down and missed her neck, embedding in the back of her head. This blow may have killed her, as it was so rough, but the executioner then gathered himself, freed the axe from the back of Mary's skull, and then crashed a second blow down. This landed on the neck and almost severed the neck completely. However, there was a small piece of sinew keeping the head from falling onto the floor. The executioner then used his axe like a saw, cutting the final strand of sinew and holding on to her head. It fell to the floor, and the executioner then held the head of Mary Queen of Scots, claiming God save the Queen. But he did not realise that Mary was wearing a wig because of the head on the Queen. It fell to the ground and rolled towards the edge of the scaffold. It was all very undignified, as blood sprayed all over the scaffold. It was claimed by a witness that her lips stirred up and down by a quarter of an hour after her head was completely taken off, and that a small dog owned by Mary had been hiding under her skirt the whole time. Elizabeth I would regret the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and she was troubled by this for the rest of her days. Even upon her own deathbed, she was concerned that this would prevent her from getting into heaven. Mary's body, because of the regent, was left unburied for some months until it was interred inside of Peterborough Cathedral in a Protestant burial service, and later it would be exhumed and then buried within Westminster Abbey by her son's request inside of a large vault under a huge tomb of her. It was through the insistence of the Privy Council and Parliament that Elizabeth I managed to execute Mary, Queen of Scots. And she at times probably did not want to. She later realised the damage that having Mary alive would be, as she survived a constant threat to her. But today, Mary, Queen of Scots, is remembered as being one of the only female monarchs in history to be executed upon the orders of another female monarch. Thank you for watching, and to support our channel, please make sure to subscribe. And again, thank you so much for watching.